The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Yesterday, President Barack Obama gave his State of the Union address for 2014. As a complete political aside, the visual of a John Boehner who looked darker than African-American Barack Obama was bizarre, to say the least. It was certainly one of the few times where during a State of the Union address, there have been multiple people of color visible on screen. So that was definitely interesting to see who was on the dais. So let's get into the subject matter. President Obama kind of opening up pretty strong, talking about the American dream. And I like the idea of the inspirational value that talking about the American dream has. However, there was not much of a mention. There was a little bit of a mention of the fact that statistically speaking, if you were born into a poor family in this country, particularly if you are very poor, you don't really have much of an American dream. It would be more of like an American delusion because it would be so unrealistic statistically that you would ever raise yourself out of that poverty. That being said, one of the most controversial parts of the speech was President Obama calling for a $10.10 per hour minimum wage. The right certainly doesn't like it. There have been countless comebacks and disagreements over whether supply side or demand side economics are where we should be focusing, in spite of the fact, of course, that supply side economics have essentially failed historically almost every time. And demand-side economics have not failed almost every time. Putting that aside, the $10.10 minimum wage is the recommendation from President Obama. He talked about growing inequality. It's good to mention what will be done. One of President Obama's ideas was instead of an IRA, what he described as a MyRA. That's a great idea if you have disposable income. But if you don't, because you don't really make that much money, it doesn't matter how you set up your MyRA. Most people are not going to have money to contribute to that. And remember, stock ownership in this country is concentrated significantly among the wealthy. Many people don't own any stock. And if you look at those that do, overwhelmingly, most of them own a very small amount of the stock that's held in the U.S. However, if you set things up properly with pre-tax money and kind of other mechanisms that can be advantageous, you can set up a situation where by putting pre-tax money into this MyRA, it changes the post-tax net pay for someone by very little. It's a good idea, Lewis. I just don't know that it really encompasses or takes into consideration the serious context that we're looking at when it comes to inequality.
No, I don't think it even comes close, unfortunately. But a living wage, that's a different story.
We had one line about drones and the NSA. I said yesterday, I'm curious whether the subject of drones or the subject of the NSA will come up. Certainly, there's no big incentive for President Obama to discuss topics on which he is not particularly popular, and he basically stayed away from it. His one line about it was, so even as we aggressively pursue terrorist networks, America must move off a permanent war footing. That's why I've imposed prudent limits on the use of drones, for we will not be safer if people abroad believe we strike within their countries without regard for the consequence. That's why, working with this Congress, I will reform our surveillance programs, because the vital work of our intelligence community depends on public confidence here and abroad that the privacy of ordinary people is not being violated. One line on drones, one line on NSA privacy. Some emailing me saying, you know what, David, in spite of the fact that you were waiting for him to talk about that, factually speaking, drones and the NSA are not the most important thing. Whether people have enough money to feed themselves is far more important. I would agree. However, if we believe that when it comes to confidence in the president and confidence in our government, the NSA and drone issues are important, and I believe that they are, it would be at least valuable in the sense of you don't feel like the president's ignoring it for him to address it more. So there's kind of two views on that, Lewis, as to whether it matters or not that NSA and drones weren't really touched.
Of course, people want to hear about it. I mean, that seems like it's taking up more of the discussion than income inequality, at least on what we call corporate news. So yeah, it didn't surprise me that there's just one line about it. Of course, he's massively unpopular, and despite this one line, I don't think that he necessarily even has any plans to scale down what's going on with drones.
Also calling for the closing of Guantanamo Bay again. I still hope it happens. You know, we're 5 years in. It was a campaign promise that President Obama just wasn't able to keep. I still hope we do close Guantanamo Bay because I think that would be the correct thing to do, and I hope that it happens. I want to focus now on the anger and vitriol from the right after President Obama, in his 2014 State of the Union address, said that he would start using executive orders to get things done if he is not able to get cooperation from Republicans. I love the reaction here, Lewis. We had Congressman Tim Huelskamp, for example, tweet, "First release of Obama speech reads like dictates from a king. All orders he will do to bypass Congress." And this continued. This was all night on right-wing media, on Twitter. My inbox was exploding, Lewis, with emails from right-wingers saying, Emperor Obama, just executive orders, bypassing the Constitution. We need to calm down, step back, and try to inject some level of sanity into the discussion over executive orders. Number one, like statutes or regulations that are set forth by government agencies, executive orders from the president are subject to judicial review, and if a court determines that the executive order is unsupported either by statute or by the Constitution, the court can strike it down. Okay, that's number one. An executive order does not circumvent the law in any way, be it constitutional or statutory. Secondly, you would think that if conservatives have a problem with executive orders in principle and not simply with President Obama, that if there were more executive orders under other presidents, they would have been even more vocally against it. So let's explore that. Looking at data from University of California, Santa Barbara on executive orders, King and Savior of the Republican Party, Ronald Reagan, issued 381 executive orders. Bill Clinton, 364. George W. Bush, Curious George, as he may be known to some, 291 executive orders, while President Obama, 5 years in, has issued only 168 executive orders. Even if we extrapolate out over the full 8 years, he is still on pace to issue fewer executive orders than George W. Bush and far fewer executive orders than Bill Clinton and King and Savior Ronald Reagan. So when Congress claims that President Obama is circumventing the law via executive order, where were they during George W. Bush's nearly 300 executive orders? Where is the criticism of the dictate president when they kneel at the throne of Ronald Reagan? Maybe, Lewis, it's actually just a double standard and yet another concocted way to criticize President Obama.
Probably, I would say so. George Bush can do no wrong. And of course, Ronald Reagan is basically God, so you can't question him. Personally, I wish Obama would use more executive orders more often.
Well, listen, President Obama tried the bipartisanship thing during the first term. It went absolutely nowhere. He kind of still was open to it during the beginning of the second term, and it is absolutely going nowhere because of Republican obstructionism. It is a logically bankrupt argument as a Republican to be angry that President Obama is doing less of the same thing Bush and Reagan did as a direct result of your own obstructionism. But Lewis, this sounds almost too logical. I don't think that the American right wants to hear this right now. One really weird thing that came out of the post-speech analysis after the State of the Union address last night was Alex Castellanos, who's a Republican and a CNN contributor. They went to him to ask him, what did you think of the speech? And he said this, and what I want you to pay attention to if you're watching the video today as opposed to just listening, look at the expression on Newt Gingrich's face after Alex Castellanos' comment. Take a look.
Alex Castellanos, the first we've heard from you tonight.
Well, I think I've said before that I think a speech by Barack Obama is a lot like sex. The worst there ever was is still excellent. And I thought he gave a very competent.
Yeah, so it's a lot like sex, I guess. The expression on Newt Gingrich's face when they panned to him of just utter confusion as to what kind of an equation is Alex Castellanos making between President Obama's speech and sex that, while not the best sex, is still pretty good as far as sex goes. This is just a very strange moment.
It's kind of weird. I understand what he's saying. People say that about different things, using that sex comparison. Yeah, just kind of bizarre. And he gets some weird looks from everyone in the room when he says it, too.
I love it. I love the look from Newt Gingrich, who actually said he thought it was a really good speech. Newt Gingrich has, since being more involved with CNN, I feel like Newt Gingrich has become exponentially more rational. It's kind of interesting. We haven't heard from Louis Gohmert, a member of Congress from Texas, for a little while. He is a Republican, although when I play this clip for you, I think you would kind of realize that anyway. Louis Gohmert's brilliant idea in terms of economics, in terms of social welfare, in terms of bringing up this country to something, I guess, better in his eyes. This is an innovative idea. I know this might not be what you would think of, but his idea is to raise taxes on the poorest on the poorest Americans. It's such a pathetic idea, but I will play it for you, and then we will discuss more.
When you hear the words fair share, think flat tax. You make more, you pay more. You make less, you pay less. And everybody needs to have skin in the game, don't they? Everybody does. You need to own a piece of this government so you'll do something about it. Everybody should. You know, I've wrestled with that. Well, what if you're so poor, the only money you have is what the government gives you? And I've wondered, isn't that wasted money? You give it and you take it back. No, it gives you an investment in the country. And that we need that.
So I don't think Louis Gohmert understands that if you have, I don't know, $100 and you get taxed 15% of that and you have $85 less, that actually leaves $15 less for things like groceries, things like, do you have a house? Do you have an apartment? When a rich person is taxed, the concept of how does this tax affect my ability to survive, my ability to stay alive and not die, that question doesn't even enter a rich person's mind when we talk about, well, is the top tax rate 36% at the federal level or 39% at the federal level? That question doesn't even enter their minds. So I think Louis Gohmert has gone completely off of the deep end, and he makes this kind of statement that if you pay taxes, you're invested in the country, that how invested in the country you are is directly proportional, for lack of a better term, to how much you pay in taxes. Well, if that's the case, why are the rich complaining so much about paying taxes? Because they're really invested in the country, according to Louis Gohmert. It must, your control, your investment level, your ownership level in your country clearly is determined by how much you pay in taxes. So rich people must really love paying taxes. No, that doesn't exactly apply that way, does it?
I wonder if you asked Louis Gohmert if everyone is paying 20%, that means everyone has an equal investment in the government. I wonder what he'd say to that, because something tells me he wouldn't agree with that.
Remember, ladies and gentlemen, incompetent people, incompetent charlatans sound really smart. They sound like geniuses to other incompetent charlatans. And if you look at the YouTube comments for clips we do when we interview extreme right-wingers, I think that rule, that proverb, for lack of a better term, becomes exceedingly visible and accurate. Remember, we are trying to expand our show to 5 shows per week, but we do need your support. We are less than a month away from the end of our fundraising campaign to grow our program from 4 shows a week to 5 shows a week. We absolutely cannot do it without your support. So please go to our website, davidpakman.com. At the top of the page, there's a blue banner that links you to our Indiegogo campaign. Click it and check it out. We'll be back after this. We've got a great interview coming up. It is Hatriot Mail Wednesday and so much more.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Our membership program is made possible in part by liberalbias.com. If you're worried about liberal bias in statistics, facts, math, other science-y type things, we'll show you how to unskew reality at liberalbias.com. You need to make it easier for conservatives to handle. Let's talk about today's member of the day. Today's member of the day is Chelsea Johnston. And you too can be David Pakman Show member of the day if you go to davidpakman.com/membership and become a supporter of our show. Not only are you supporting non-corporate independent media, you get a whole bunch of great perks, including the bonus show hosted and produced by producer Lewis. Today is a day for Hatriot Mail, and I don't want to make you wait any longer for that.
Between waving a Gadsden's flag from a highway overpass to drafting George Zimmerman for a 2016 run, a patriot has little time for anything else. But when that annoying little dweeb, David Pakman, really pushes the liberal envelope beyond what a God-fearing teabagger can bear, there's Hatriot Mail. Your brief respite from the unending deluge of liberal bias.
So I want to just issue kind of a general warning. This week's Hatriot Mail does have some suggestive and mature language that may not be appropriate for children, although I don't really think too many children watch or listen to this show. And what I want to point your attention to here is the frequency with which those who really hate our so-called agenda on this show and are presumably anti-gay write stuff that have the letters have very significant kind of homoerotic undertones. Just pay attention to that as we listen to this week's Hatriot Mail.
Only a douchebag like you would try and make a singer racist because of a Confederate flag and ignore the lyrics of crap music. You win the Moron Award, along with a 2-foot-long cement dildo greased up and ready for your rear-end pleasure.
Yeah, I just never understand, Lewis, how the most anti-gay right-wing people seem to just have a predilection for homoerotic language.
It's very bizarre. That is certainly one of the more visually descriptive Hatriot Mails we've done.
Speaking of visually descriptive, Nephi sent me a story about a teen who had his testicle ruptured by a cop. This is 16-year-old Pennsylvania teenager Darren Manning. He started his day, like maybe many other days, playing basketball, and ended up under arrest and in excruciating pain as the result of alleged police brutality. The case is being investigated by Internal Affairs at the police department. And Veronica Joyner, who's the founder of the Mathematics, Civics, and Sciences Charter School in Philadelphia, gave some of the student athletes hats, gloves, and scarves on a day that, like many days here in the Northeast this winter, was very, very cold. The students were walking to the gym to play their game. Manning says one of his teammates made some kind of a snide remark to a police officer with Philadelphia PD who was on patrol. The officer approached the group. A lot of the kids just ran away, whereas Manning started running but then stopped, thinking, hey, I didn't do anything wrong. I don't need to run. And as his mom later explained, she told her son, you need to not fear the police, but respect the police. So he said, I will stick around. According to the police report, Purcell then got involved after seeing these students running away with ski masks. And of course, they were wearing scarves, not actually ski masks. And Manning, who has no history of disciplinary problems, straight A student, gets arrested for what police are calling aggravated assault, resisting arrest, and reckless endangerment. According to the report, Manning was fighting with an officer and hit him 3 times and also ripped off his radio. However, The report does not indicate any injuries at all sustained by police, which is strange given the amount, frequency, and force with which Manning was attacking police officers. It's a little bit weird. In any case, then Manning says, for some reason, a female officer came to pat him down. He says that he was sexually assaulted and brutalized by the officer. That officer has not been named. She patted me down. This is unbelievable. She patted me down and then touched my butt and my private parts. And then she grabbed and squeezed and pulled my private parts, and I felt something pop. He suffered a ruptured testicle, screamed in pain, needed emergency surgery, and is now in a wheelchair as he recovers. The injury may prevent him from fathering children in his life. Police are not commenting about this. An investigation is ongoing. And according to reports from Internal Affairs obtained by Philly.com, Officer Purcell, who's the officer in question, has had complaints in the past regarding false arrests. Of course, he was ultimately cleared of wrongdoing by police investigations. We can always trust internal investigations of what police do, Lewis. Of course, the reaction online is that race was a factor here. Some, black kids running away, and that they are treated differently than white kids who are running. Factually speaking, we know race is a factor in law enforcement. We know it is a factor in the prosecution of drug-related laws. We'll just have to wait and see what the investigation reveals. But I just always have a hard time trusting police investigations of themselves.
It seems kind of counterproductive. I'd like to think that after all those police dramas I've watched, that Internal Affairs are kind of usually a separate organization dealing with this type of thing. Of course, when it's just that single station investigating things themselves, everyone's friends, and these things tend to get swept under the rug.
Female inmates at an Alabama prison say they have been raped by guards and forced to take part in strip shows and also go to the bathroom in front of guards. This is being reported in the Daily Mail. Inmates at an Alabama women's prison appeared to have been raped, sodomized, and sexually abused by guards, and in some instances allegedly forced to perform sex acts to obtain basic sanitary supplies, according to a United States Department of Justice report. The women at Tutwiler universally fear for their safety. That's what's written in the report. Around a third of employees at Tutwiler have had sex with female inmates, according to the report. The report found that the allegations of sex abuse are grossly underreported because of the fear of retaliation. Roughly a quarter of the population of the inmate population reported sexual harassment, dehumanizing behavior, excessive use of force, and inadequate medical care. As if we didn't have enough problems with the American prison system, we now have a nightmare scenario where a third of employees having sex with female inmates. These numbers are absolutely shocking. You would think 3 employees might be outrageous as it is. A third of the employees having sex with female inmates. And of course, as we see often, Lewis, in situations of disproportionate power, the victims are afraid to come forward because they will be absolutely helpless in preventing further retaliation.
Yeah, it's a shocking story. I can't even imagine the state of mind these inmates are in as a result of this. It's pretty incredible. I mean, this is the type of thing that you think you only see in movies and shows.
In 2007, a federal study found that Tutwiler Women's Prison is the women's prison with the highest rate of sexual assault in the nation. I wish I had more to say about it. It is not altogether an optimistic scenario in terms of changing anything because of these the way power is established and awarded and distributed. It's just a horrible situation. And I think we'll pause on that note. We'll talk to Daniel Estulin next.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
I'm joined today by award-winning investigative journalist and best-selling author Daniel Estulin. The new book is Trans-Evolution: The Coming Age of Human Deconstruction. It's really great to have you. I've been researching you all morning, and you really have a very long and eclectic history of different areas you focused on. I mean, you've done a lot of research into the Bilderberg Group. You were a very interesting guest on the Alex Jones show, where you talked about a possible assassination conspiracy against Congressman Ron Paul. Let's start maybe with the Ron Paul thing. How did you where did that come from, this assassination theory?
First of all, it's great to be on your show. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure and honor to be with you. The Ron Paul interview, if my memory serves me well, that was back in 2007, I think.
It was.
Yeah, it was always a way back. Now, I've been researching the Bilderbergers for almost 17 years or so, since the beginning of the middle of the 1990s, more or less. And a lot of the sources that I've developed over the years, and of course, people who have read my Bilderberg reports know that the information I get is true blue information based on the people who actually attend these meetings. So I was told by them, and it was confirmed by the people, some of the people that we know in the Secret Service. You can call them sympathizers, people who've read my reports, who've read my book, who know what I'm talking about, and who also understand that I try to expose these people because I think it's important, because freedom has no price, no matter how much these people try to pay and pay off, as they've tried to do with me way back in 2003 in France, in Versailles, when they gave me a blank check. And I asked them, how much does freedom cost? How many zeros? And they kind of patted me on the back and said, have a good day, Mr. Estulin. So that was the information I got from these sources. And I don't know if it helped, or if it had some kind of a positive impact on, but basically Ron Paul is still alive, so that's a good thing.
But so, in other words, when I think of that, what I understand you've written is that they were feeling threatened by his increasing popularity as a potential presidential candidate. Thinking back, at no point did real insiders I spoke to ever think Ron Paul had a real chance of being the next president of the U.S. So to me, putting aside whether it would be possible to assassinate him, from a pragmatic standpoint, it seems silly to conspire to kill a guy who had no shot.
I think what it was, and if I recall correctly, because it has been 7 years ago, it was a trial balloon more than anything else. It was the kind of thing that gets the debate going. And when you can debate things, you can get people to split up and talk about something. It means you're taking their attention away from something else. I think that was the basic point of what's behind this trial balloon more than anything else. Because as you said, Ron Paul had absolutely no chance of winning at all. He did have somewhat of a chance of splitting a vote, the right-wing vote, but. I think it's silly to think that his candidacy, and as we've seen it over the years, would have amounted to much as far as the voter recognition is concerned. But again, the trial balloon for me, and they have done this over the years, not only Bilderbergs but just in politics in general, is to get people debating things. If you can split them out, get people debate things, then again you take people away from real issues, and then these real issues somehow make their way into the mainstream without anybody noticing.
So you talked about Bilderberg Group. Is it possible to be someone who believes that the Bilderberg Group exists and that meetings are held, but doesn't believe that the ultimate goal is what you describe as a kind of world government or one world government? Can you believe the group exists but not be so conspiratorial?
I've never talked about world government at all. I've done everything in my power over the years to make sure that people understood it had nothing to do with world government, and there's no such thing, as four old geezers sitting in an old room holding hands, staring at a crystal ball, planning the world's domination. The world is a very complex place, and to think that you can get four people to sit there and make the world go around and the way they want it. I don't care if you're a Rockefeller, a Rothschild, or whoever you may be. It's not about one world government. It's not about an evil conspiracy, one-eyed monster, pyramid. It's about one world company. Corporations have a lot more power than any government on the planet.
And would it be fair to say that regardless of membership or lack of membership in the so-called Bilderberg Group, however it's loosely described, that really the focus should be on this kind of corporate plutocracy that exists and the power, the disproportionate power that big corporations have? Do you even need Bilderberg?
You do not really, because again, as I said, it's a conveyor belt.
Right.
It was an important organization. It's a conspiracy reality. Let's put it this way: it's not a conspiracy theory. It was an important organization, or very important, back in the 50s and the 60s, when the people who really had certain level of power, wealth, and know-how got together and built that organization. But today, if you look at some of the people in it, a lot of these people, I wouldn't let them clean my house, let alone participate in important meetings. But what they do is that the people who attend these meetings, all of them hold a position where they can influence, certain level of decision making. So you have the president of the World Bank, International Monetary Fund, Federal Reserve, European Central Bank. Then you have the European commissioners and the presidents of big corporations.
Right.
And when these people come together, it's obvious, that they're going to pull or push things in their direction. It's normal. And what I've done in this new book, The Trans Evolution, is I've taken it, to a next level. Basically, I got 3 kids, and my oldest daughter is 16 years old. And, she or her generation, our generation of these children, they're the last truly human generation of human beings on the planet. For, her children are going to be transhuman, post-human, man, machine, cyborgs, who are beings but not totally human, part man, part machine. And that's the evolution. And we're seeing it today. And what I've done is, in Trans Evolution, is explain, if you go back 6,000 years, and again, think of a pyramid. The people who controlled knowledge 6,000 years ago were the high priests, and they, gave it to us one drop at a time, just enough so we can do our jobs. But today, this pyramid is inverse pyramid, because anybody, sitting in a tree in the middle of an Amazon forest or in the middle of Patagonia, okay, one of the most beautiful, parts of the entire planet, with a computer and an internet connection, has access to the entire history of human knowledge at their fingertips. And if you're the elite, it's a dangerous thing. So what they've done is they're using this technological advancement and technology and development, which is very expensive, very, very expensive, okay, to make sure that they, again, get the upper hand.
Sure. Well, let's talk. To talk a few of the things that interest me and that I've discussed on my show quite a bit, which are either directly or kind of tangentially talked about in your book, are certainly we may be somewhere between 5 to 15 years away from significantly better cancer treatments, for example. And an interest of mine, and we've already started to hear some comments, including from a big pharma CEO, about whether there is really a financial interest because of the corporate system that we have in curing cancer, because so much money is made from the lifelong treatment of the disease. You talk about augmented reality in the book as well. And when we look at those technologies, and will they just be for the rich or will they be for everyone? So I was interested in your book because so much of what you discuss is fascinating, but the corporate structure, the financial system, concerns me as far as who will these technologies be available to?
Touche. That's a beautiful question. That's one of the best questions anyone has ever asked me. Well, that's the whole thing. People who have the money, and you can actually buy immortality. Well, how much will it cost? Well, I don't know. How much do you want to pay to live another 200 years? A bazillion dollars? I don't have it, so I can't live it. And as far as what you're saying is concerned, scientists are convinced that by 2035, not some kook scientists, by Nobel, prize-winning scientists, by 2035 is just around the corner. It's less than a generation away. The first successful attempt to transfer one's personality to an alternative carrier will take place. And they're talking about this, the epoch of cybernetic immortality. So in one generation, bodies made of nanorobots, can take any shape or rise alongside, holograph bodies. And by 2045, we'll be able to, download our consciousness into an avatar of our being. So literally, we'll be able to live forever. But
it's the consciousness.
It's the consciousness, exactly. And to most people, how do you explain that? You can't, okay? But the whole thing about projects such as Project Russia 25 movement, they're creating a new vector for civilization aimed at future human development and evolution by integrating these new discoveries and development from science, physics, energetics, aeronautics, bioengineering, nanotechnology, neurology, cybernetics, cognitive science.
So let me ask you, in the very limited time we have left, with every new technology, there has been misuse of that technology. So I know you could probably talk an hour about this, but in looking at the next 50 or 100 years in technological development, what's the biggest concern for the negative effects or misuse of that technology?
Because you just said it, misuse of the technology, because you can have, with the technology we have today, you can have a surgeon operating from Philadelphia on a little girl who has, leukemia in the Philippines. And you can also have a 4-star general sitting in his office in the Pentagon, kill a whole bunch of people using almost the same kind of technology half the world away using a drone. So it all depends on how we, the people, will understand that technology can really be a saving grace for mankind, because in the future, our future as a human beings is to conquer space, to leave the planet Earth and emigrate, because we're going to come to a point where there's going to be so many people, we're going to have to conquer space. And that's why I have these amazing projects right now. Mars One project, the Russians and the European Space Agency are getting ready to conquer Mars in 4 years. We're going to Mars.
All right, we've been speaking with Daniel Estulin. Although we don't agree about the Ron Paul assassination theory, we certainly had an interesting conversation. Check out the new book, Trans Evolution, The Coming Age of Human Deconstruction. Daniel, thanks for doing this.
Wonderful to be on your show. Thank you.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
We reported a week or so ago that Anonymous, the internet gathering known as Anonymous, has pointed to Walmart as a potential target of their hacking. And Lou Colagiovanni from ruthlesspolitics.com broke that story with a video. We talked about it, and a lot of interest in that. I actually got way more emails about the possibility of Anonymous taking on Walmart, specifically because of their gripes with Walmart and not paying living wages. Now we have more news about this, and we're linking to the latest article in the description to the YouTube video, and it will also be on our website. Now Anonymous has said that they are starting to move against Walmart and against their corporate policies. They are starting to set up public strategy sessions, including on MIRC, on Internet Relay Chat. This is interesting to me, Louis, because on the one hand, I'm very interested to see what, if anything, Anonymous does to Walmart, because as we know, if Anonymous is able to mess with Walmart's accounts receivable system or their vendor shipping schedules or their inventory, it could be just literally millions or even tens of millions of dollars of impact for Walmart. At the same time, the fact that they're publicly saying the MIRC channels where they'll be meeting to discuss this seems like they could be open to infiltration from Walmart associates or something.
Yeah, well, I'm sure they know how to protect themselves. I don't expect Walmart to really know what to do at this point to protect themselves. And I'm glad about that. I'm very curious to see what they uncover. It's not just messing with the things that they can mess with. It's what documents they can uncover. It's what information they can divulge to the people that will also help help the battle, I guess.
Yesterday, when President Obama talked about the success of Costco paying a living wage during the State of the Union, my mind immediately went to what isn't being said here, but should be appended to the end of every sentence about Costco is as opposed to what Walmart does. They pay a living wage as opposed to what Walmart does. They have lower employee turnover as opposed to what Walmart does. Everything that I was hearing there was in comparison to what Walmart is doing. It's going to be interesting. And of course, I maintain that I don't encourage or advocate for people breaking the laws in any way. That being said, I believe that it is a good message to send to Walmart that they should be paying better wages. I want to talk about a socialist councilwoman who is putting her money where her mouth is and not accepting her full salary. This is in NBC News. Seattle has one socialist city council member, and she announced that she is going to make good on a campaign pledge and accept a salary that is equal to the average salary in the city, as opposed to the salary she could get. The $117,000 salary that she is entitled to, which, by the way, one of the highest city council salaries in the country, All but $40,000 is going to go to different charities, strike funds, women's rights groups, etc. She will keep $40,000 because that is more or less the average full-time pay of someone who lives in Seattle. This is fascinating to me, Louis. This is just interesting because imagine if this rule applied in the House and Senate of the United States. You earn the average salary of those in your congressional district or in your state. Things would be upended overnight.
I don't know, David. I think if you told senators and congressmen that that was going to be the case, they'd do everything in their power to make sure that billionaires start moving to their state.
Right. Would they just mess with the average? Well, then maybe it has to be the median rather than the mean, or you can figure that out. But Councilwoman Sawant is the first socialist to be elected in Seattle in about 100 years, according to what city council staff told the Associated Press. I think that this is very interesting. We will see how it goes, and we'll see what the reaction is. And it just further reinforces we need to change the way that politics is funded and financed in this country. And, even if we did the average salary thing, there could still be gifts. There could still be the promise of huge lobbying jobs when you finish your term and so many other things. We've got a lot of work to do. Let's play some voicemails. Our voicemail number is 219-2-DAVID-P. You can call 24 hours a day, and then we'll play a couple voicemails at the end of each show. Let's take a listen to one and see what they had to say.
Hey, David, Bill from Pennsylvania. Really love the show. Just a quick comment on your show of Monday, January 27th, the interview with Carl Gallups.
Right.
At one point, he kept going back to the religious text to prove that the religious texts were indeed true.
Right.
And when you asked for independent corroboration of the religious text that he kept referring back to, he said, I don't know if I'm sure you remember, but he said, I don't understand the question. Unfortunately, my friend, you were hosed at that point. You were never going to get through to him. It takes that kind of thinking to swallow the whole idea of a talking snake and a virgin birth and all that stuff that accompanies religion. Anyway, I thought the interview was fascinating, and keep up the good work. Thanks.
Yeah, there's actually some interesting follow-up to that interview. There have been some email exchanges. Not all parties are satisfied with that interview, and maybe I'll talk about it on the bonus show today or tomorrow, because there's actually a lot happening behind the scenes. There's fallout from that interview. Let's listen to one more voicemail. This is, I don't know how to describe this. This is a voicemail that is taking the MSNBC cutting to Justin Bieber story and really making it the epitome, the microcosm of how corporate media handles pop culture right now. Take a listen to this.
Hey, David. Last night, you'll never believe this. Last night, Lewis and Justin Bieber were drag racing in front of my house. The Eggman was in Justin Bieber's Lamborghini, and Gordon and Diabetic Daryl were in Lewis's Toyota SUV. The weird part was Lewis won the race because Bieber and the Eggman stopped at every house to throw some eggs. TMZ's already offered me $100,000 for the video. If you want to match it, I'll send it to you. Also, I thought it was a little unfair to smear MSNBC for what Andrea Mitchell, who's married to Alan Greenspan, did. MSNBC is the only fair and balanced billionaire network. Thanks.
Yeah, there actually were a couple emails. Very funny. There were a couple emails saying, is it really Andrea Mitchell's fault or is it MSNBC's fault? And I actually don't blame Andrea Mitchell for interrupting a serious conversation about the NSA surveillance programs to talk about Justin Bieber in court. I assume that Andrea Mitchell's choice was not to make that change, but it was something that came from producers. Whatever you think about Andrea Mitchell, I have no evidence to suggest she's really interested in Justin Bieber's arrest.
I really doubt it.
Yeah. On today's bonus show, we have an excellent bonus show. We will talk about the Morsi trial in Egypt. We will talk about the world's largest shark abattoir. And we will also talk about a follow-up to the sperm donor story from earlier this week, which has absolutely blown up, Louis, the sperm donor story. We've gotten so many emails about it, and we just must follow up. Louis hosts and produces the bonus show. Go to davidpakman.com/membership to become a supporter, to get access to our full archive of shows, and to get access to the incredible bonus show where I am the sidekick and Louis is the host. We will see you then in just a few minutes.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.